Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Today's episode is titled, Not Everyone is Going to See Things Your Way. So let's jump into it. Every single one of us has our own way of viewing the world. We're all shaped by our experiences, the way we were raised, the people we've met, and the things we've been through. And because of that, no two people are ever going to see things exactly the same way. It's something that I think a lot of people forget. We kind of just assume that others should see things the way we do, and when they don't, we think, hey, what's wrong with them? But here's the thing. No one is going to view the world the way you do. It's just a fact, and that's okay. We're all wired differently. So when you go through life, you're going to meet people who see things in a completely different light, and that doesn't mean their perspective is wrong. It just means it's different. It can be hard to accept that sometimes, especially when you really believe that your way of seeing things is the right way. Trust me, I get it. I've been guilty of that myself. It's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking, I've got it all figured out and everyone else just doesn't get it. But what I've been trying to work on is stepping back and realizing that my view of the world isn't the only view. It's just one way to look at things. So when someone doesn't agree with me, or doesn't see things the same way, I try not to take it personally. Their perspective is just as valid as mine. And honestly, that's a pretty freeing mindset to have. It takes a lot of the pressure off, because you're not constantly trying to prove that you're right. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. There is no one correct way to live life. What works for me might not work for you, and that's perfectly fine. Everyone is doing what they think is best for them, based on where they're at in their journey. But of course, that's not always easy to remember when someone's disagreeing with you. We naturally want to convince people that our way is better, that we have the answers they don't. But I've realized something. Maybe people aren't supposed to see things my way. Maybe they're meant to see things in their own way. And that's part of their story, their growth. At the end of the day, we can both live our lives, be happy, and thrive, even if we don't see eye to eye on everything. That's a lesson a lot of people seem to forget, especially in today's world. Disagreements are inevitable, but they don't have to turn into full-blown conflicts or disrespect. One area where I see this all the time is in politics. Man, it gets ugly. People have different political views, and instead of just accepting that, they start attacking each other. It's wild. Someone supports a different candidate, or has a different opinion on a policy, and suddenly they're treated like they're less than human. Like they don't even deserve basic respect. And that's just messed up. We've reached a point where we can't even have a civil conversation if we disagree politically. It's like people think that if you don't see the world exactly as they do, you're the enemy. And it's so frustrating because, really, we're all just people trying to make sense of the world around us. We should be able to respect each other, even when we don't agree. But instead, we see people tearing each other down over differences in opinion, and it's exhausting. The reality is, there are always going to be people who look at you differently just because you don't share their views. That's never going away. You'll always have folks who look down on others just because they think differently. And it's not realistic to expect that to change. So what's the solution? I think the best approach is to ignore the noise and live your life the way that makes sense to you. Don't get caught up in trying to please everyone or win their approval, because it's impossible. At the end of the day, you've got to do what works for you, and let others do the same. Now, I'm not saying it's always easy. I've got my own set of beliefs, some of which lean more conservative. And let me tell you, when I talk to people with more liberal viewpoints, I often get hit with a ton of negativity. It's like there's no room for conversation anymore. Just because we don't see eye to eye on certain things, suddenly I'm getting hit with hate and disrespect. And I don't get it. We might not agree on everything, but we definitely agree on some things. But people, they just love to focus on the differences. It's almost like people are hardwired to focus on the negatives, you know? Like, they zero in on the one or two things we don't agree on and completely ignore all the common ground we have. And I guess that's part of human nature. But man, wouldn't life be so much better if we just focused on the things we do have in common? If we could appreciate the fact that even though we see some things differently, we're all just trying to navigate life the best we can. This tendency to focus on the negatives shows up in so many places. It's not just politics. You see it in everyday stuff too, like the debate between Android and Apple. People love to rip each other apart over the smallest things, like which phone you use or what kind of games you play. It's ridiculous. Just like what you like and let other people enjoy what they like without turning it into a big thing. It's really that simple. But for some reason, people get so worked up when someone doesn't share their preferences, and it's kind of sad. We're all allowed to have our own opinions, and that's what makes life interesting. We should be celebrating those differences, not attacking each other over them. Anyway, that's about all I've got for today. Thanks for hanging out with me and listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Signing out. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye.